So if you've seen my Street Fighter 6 review, you would probably know that I actually really enjoy Street Fighter 6. Honestly, there's a lot to love about Street Fighter 6 when you go from the combat to gameplay and how easy it is for new players like myself to get into the franchise, all the way down to the very exciting create your own character mode where you can actually create and design your own character and movesets. There really is a lot to love about Street Fighter 6. However, in my review, I mentioned that one of my least favorite things about Street Fighter 6 is actually the World Tour mode, which I assume I'm pretty much in the minority when it comes to that, because I see a lot of people really loving the World Tour mode, and I respect them for that. But me personally, I just don't enjoy that much. I appreciate the attempt at a story mode that Capcom decided to give Street Fighter 6 a shot at the story mode. However, I don't think this was it. I think this is a good step in the right direction, but I think it needs some work. And that's what I want to focus on today, because I'm going to give you guys my honest reasons for why I don't like the World Tour mode, so that way you guys can maybe sort of kind of understand where I'm coming from. So my name is Ruben with NerdSpace, and here are 7 things that I hate about the World Tour mode in Street Fighter 6. Let's get it. So number 7 is the items, and it's not that I have an issue with the items themselves, it's how the items are used, and it kind of makes the game a little too easy in my opinion. So first off, you can actually pick up healing and combat items. Basically what that means is that you can heal mid-fight, and you can also use items that will help you improve your attack power or incoming damage attacks. But these items could be used mid-fight, obviously, so you can pause the game and use these items and completely change the game around. To me, when it comes to a fighting game, I feel that is kind of a cheat, and I know you don't have to use these items, I just hate how it's there. I feel like this feels more like an RPG, and I know that's what they're actually going for, but it kind of reminds me of an RPG, and I'm not looking for that in my fighting games. I'm looking for more of a cinematic story where I can just fight, see the story, fight, see the story. I don't really need the whole RPG elements. I don't need to worry about items. I don't want to have to worry about healing myself or using items to make myself stronger or more defensive. I feel like it's just something that we don't need in our fighting games, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there probably disagree with me there, but me personally, I think this wasn't needed at all. And speaking of items, I want to talk about some of the different rewards you can get in the game and how annoying you can be to try to get them. First off, in order to dye your clothes a specific color, you need to find dyes. And that wouldn't be that big of a deal, except for it's very, very difficult to find the dyes you need. Especially since to create different colors, you need a ton of different dyes to change the color. For example, I'm a big black color person. I love wearing all black. It makes me feel cool. And unfortunately, it becomes a huge pain to try and actually make my clothes black. Because in order to dye a simple hat black, I need to go get 5 different black color dyes, and the way I do that is I have to go up to different people on the streets, look and see what the rewards are, then I have to do a specific challenge within that fight against that person in order for me to get that reward, and it becomes really tedious. I wish this wasn't something that they made so difficult to get, or at the very least just make it to where maybe 1 dye equals changing the color on its own, instead of saying, oh, you need 5 dyes to change the color. This is something I really didn't like. I understand what they were going for, and I do appreciate the whole customization when it comes to the equipment, but I really don't think they needed to make it so difficult just to change the color of your clothes.
Come get some.
So number 6 is a very interesting one because it deals with the side quests, and while I do appreciate a lot of the side quests they added into the game, there's a lot of filler side quests in there. Specifically, the ones that really annoy the hell out of me are the tutorial ones. Like, why don't you just create your own tutorial mode for people to experience, and then the side quests just focus on actual story elements? Like, some of the really cool side quests I did like had to do with Carlos, which he is a character from Final Fight. and it was a cool cameo to have him involved. However, a majority of the side quests has to do with tutorials teaching you the different mechanics of Street Fighter 6, which I appreciate the tutorial aspect. I just don't need it as a side quest, because when you're a completionist like myself, it drives me insane seeing all these blue stars all over the map and then realizing that 90% of them are tutorial missions. I don't think that was needed at all. I think there should have been maybe a gym or something that you can go to and do all the tutorials if you wanted to, but don't make each one its own side quest. That gets kind of redundant, honestly, in my opinion. And a lot of side quests do get really repetitive, honestly. Like I said, there are some shining moments. Another one that I felt was okay was the one where you actually have to dress up in a specific outfit in order to travel to a specific country to meet a specific character. That one was fine. It wasn't really much of a story with a side quest, but hey, it's a side quest. It's just a little bit additional content in the game. The main thing I would change here is make the side quests a little bit more exciting. Find ways to make them a little bit more interesting and additional story elements, instead of just making them extremely repetitive, boring, or just tutorial missions. So number 5 is the countries. And I felt like the whole world tour mode didn't really capitalize on the fact that you were traveling around the world. With the exception of 2 countries, which we'll get into that in just a moment, really most of the countries you usually go to, there's not really much to explore. You're literally just going there to meet a specific character, and then you can walk maybe 10 feet to see the entire map. That's pretty much all you get when it comes to the countries. I felt like it was kind of pointless, and it might have just been easier just to bring the characters into Metro City or the other country, Nassau, but it was a decision that they wanted to make sure that these characters were introduced in their own country. But like I said, it just felt pointless. And the reasons they came up with to send you to these countries is really annoying and doesn't make sense at all. For example, 2 of the countries you visit, I think it was Jamaica and Brazil, 2 of the countries you have to go to in order to meet, the main roster characters. You go there specifically just because your old mentor, Luke, wants souvenirs. So you go there, collect the souvenirs, bring them back to Luke, and that's the end of that mission. You don't have to go back to those countries at all ever again. And I really didn't like it. And we'll talk more about the main roster later on, because that's a different issue I have. But on top of the reasons for you having to go there, like I mentioned earlier, another issue I had with the country specifically is that you don't really get to explore the country. Like, if you're gonna go there, fine, but add a little bit. Maybe add specific shops. I knew you had a merchant there, but maybe add a couple different shops that you can go to and purchase different clothes that kind of meet that specific country and make it just a little bit more explorable. Because honestly, like I said, Metro City and Nassau are the only 2 countries that you can actually explore and feels like an open world. The rest of them just kind of feel very shoot in and is more like a backdrop, really, because again, it's just there with the character from the main roster, and that's pretty much it. Nothing else to do in those worlds. I think that was a missed opportunity. If you're gonna do the world tour mode and you're gonna travel to these worlds, make it more exciting to travel to these worlds other than just meeting the characters from the main roster from that country.
Ooh, move your body! Come on! Let me see it! No. Come on, yo.
I feel like the protagonist of the game, the one that you create, is kind of annoying, and they are pretty dumb, honestly. But I think the biggest issue I have with the main protagonist of the game is the fact that they are a silent protagonist. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of games out there where there are silent protagonists, and it works pretty good for the game. 2 perfect examples I can think of: you got the Pokemon trainer, of course, silent protagonist, and then you got Link from the Zelda franchise. Both are silent protagonists, but they do it in a way where it actually makes sense and it works. However, it does not work in this game at all, because you can see the protagonist keep trying to talk and stuff like that, and it just makes moments really cringy and awkward at those times. I think I would have preferred you to be able to pick a main roster character, so that way we can see their interactions to each of these things, instead of creating your own character, which I really like, but then them having no emotion, basically. And I thought we were gonna get that, because when you were creating your character, you can choose the voice they have, but I guess that's just for the combat, which is fine. But I think I preferred that they would have done something similar to Hogwarts Legacy, maybe just do 2 to 4 voices and allowed us to potentially use those voices, because again, the world tour mode, it did not help the story at all that the protagonist was silent. and it made things feel a little bit more cheesy and awkward. And I think the story could have been improved upon so much more if the character that you created interacted more with what was going on around them. So while I don't think every game needs to have a protagonist that talks, I do think this specific story that they were going for, this world tour mode, I feel like it was definitely something that was needed, and it would have made the story just a little bit more interesting to see your character's reaction to everything. I think it was a missed opportunity where you can't at least choose the dialogue that your character says in different moments. Like, if your character is going to be a silent protagonist, fine, we don't need to hear their voice, but maybe let their sentences be read out so we can see what they're saying. You can choose a different type of dialogue. Even if it doesn't change the story at all, at least you can create your own reactions to what's happening around you. And speaking of the story, let's focus on number 3, because the story is my number 3 for this list. I think the story is kind of cheesy and pretty awful, and honestly a majority of the story is pretty boring. Now, before I start diving down into this, I just want to say, if you like the story, bravo, I'm happy for you, I'm glad you enjoyed the story. And Capcom, I do not want them to stop attempting to make a story mode, because I want a good story with these characters. I just think Capcom went about it the wrong way. So I appreciate the attempt at a story from Capcom. I don't want them to stop that. But this story was just not it. Again, I felt like I got better story from the arcade mode with the characters. And those are pretty much just small, like 10-second cutscenes at the beginning and the end of the arcade mode. So it's pretty embarrassing to say that I felt like I enjoyed the story there better than I did in the World Tour mode. But the World Tour mode had a lot of issues in my opinion when it came to the story. First off, I felt like that the main character, the main protagonist, is kind of an idiot. There was one part, and I feel like this isn't too much of a spoiler, it's just talking about like a specific mission, but it's early game. There is a mission where your best friend steals a purse from a gang, and he plans on selling it to like get money or whatever. So that gang ends up finding out that you're close to that person that stole the purse, and they come to you and say, hey, we're gonna come after your friend unless you can recover that purse for us. So your immediate reaction, your number one thing that you realize that you have to do is to go and create a counterfeit. And instead of trying to find a way to get the purse back and what's in the purse, you think you can trick the gang by making a counterfeit purse and just be okay, everything's gonna be okay. So you literally go all the way to a different country to get a specific part to help recreate this purse. And of course, when the gang gets it, they're like, okay, well, the purse is empty. This is literally useless to us. I don't know what the main character was thinking, and I feel like they are kind of an idiot. But main character aside, I feel like the story is very basic and predictable in so many levels, and it is just really boring. I feel like this game tries extremely hard to be a Yakuza game, like a Dragon game, and it just doesn't succeed at all in my opinion. I don't normally mind cheesy moments. That's fine. I love my cheesy games. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the original Resident Evil games, and we all know that the dialogue and the story there can be really cheesy. However, I feel like this isn't it. I feel like this is even hurt a lot more by the story itself, the whole point of the story. Your character spends the entire game trying to figure out why they want to fight, and I don't think they really ever come up with an answer for that. They spend 90% of the game trying to figure out, hey, I want to become a fighter because, or I want to be strong because, and they never answer that question. You don't even get to choose to answer that question. And it's actually ironic, and I won't go into spoiler territory with this, but there are some things that your character does that end up basically screwing over other characters in this game unintentionally because of how stupid your character is. Like I said, I'll avoid the spoilers there, but near the end you'll see what I'm talking about there. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, hit up the comments. I'll be happy to send you a DM or reply to your comment and let you know what I'm talking about. So for me, when it comes to Street Fighter, I feel like one of the things that really draws a lot of players in has to do with the roster. For example, you have people like Ken and Ryu, or some really crazy over-the-top fighters like Blanca, some crazy grappler wrestler types like Marissa and Zangief. There's some really interesting characters inside Street Fighter that I think it was a missed opportunity for what they did with the World Tour mode, because basically Most of the main roster, they're just there to train you. They don't compete, they're not part of the main story. Basically, your interaction with them, the only reason why you go and see these characters is because you're traveling to the world to find something else. For example, I mentioned in the last one how the only reason why you go to Jamaica and Brazil and meet the characters in those two countries is specifically just because you want to go get souvenirs. And the reason why you meet characters like Ken, Guile, and Ryu is because you are tasked with stalking them, basically. That's how you meet those characters. It just feels very shoot in, and it feels like a missed opportunity because these are some really cool, unique characters that I feel like should have been more entangled in the story. Now, I did mention some of the characters are kind of bigger parts of the story, at least for the main roster, but most of them are usually the newer characters. So for example, you actually do get some time with Jamie, who is the new Drunken Fist style fighter, and you get a lot of time with JP, who is kind of the big bad of this game. But for the most part, a lot of the main roster you probably have very small interactions with, and you barely get to interact with them, and they're not really part of the main story. They're kind of just there. Like I said, I think JP is the only one that's even part of the main story, and I do feel like this was a missed opportunity. At least in the final tournament, I thought it would be a better idea to maybe bring some of the main roster as like participants in this tournament, because then it would have made that tournament so much more exciting, and I think that was a missed opportunity. So in my opinion, I think this is one of the things that kind of bummed me out the most, because when I thought World Tour Mode, I thought, okay, I'm going to be competing in these tournaments against some of the best of the best. Meanwhile, I'm mainly competing against these nobodies, created characters that are stealing the movesets of other bigger name characters. That's pretty much the extent of the World Tour Mode when it comes to the main roster, and that's sad to say, honestly, because again, I think the main roster should have been more evolved. I feel like I got a lot more story from the arcade mode for the main characters than I did from the World Tour Mode, and I think that's pretty messed up in my opinion. This is supposed to be the main story of Street Fighter 6, and we really didn't get too much story on some of the main roster characters. But number one, for the love of God, why did you make it so difficult to level up in every aspect of this game? First off, the main character, the created character that you made. Leveling them up is a pain. It's not the worst thing to level up. It's not as bad as something else that we'll talk a little bit about in just a moment, but it's still somewhat of a pain because I played a decent amount of matches. I fought a decent amount of people, and I barely was able to level up. It just seems like that the leveling up for the main character was not thought out as much, and I'm concerned, because I mentioned this in my review, but I'm concerned that this is kind of setting the stage for them to introduce a game-changing mechanic where you can just buy a microtransaction that levels up your character faster, so you don't have to wait to level them up. I can see that happening. We've already seen a tease of that happening when it came to Resident Evil 4 Remake with the upgrading the weapons, and I can see them kind of getting ready to do the same thing with this game with how hard it is to level yourself up. But leveling yourself up isn't as bad. It can be done, it doesn't take too long, and you do get perks from like clothes and the skill tree, and I love that aspect. However, the thing I think it really suffers at when it comes to the leveling up, the upgrading system, is to deal with the masters. Jesus, why do they make it so difficult to level up your master level? Like, they make it impossible for you to max out every single character, which, fine, whatever, but even just maxing out one character, you can choose the same master for the entire game, and you will barely, maybe, if you're lucky, get to the max level with that master. It's a pain, and I do not understand why they made this so difficult, and this is where I see the microtransactions really coming in and changing the gameplay mechanic, because this is almost impossible to completely max out all the masters. I mean, you got to fight a lot of matches. Even if you just do the main story, you're still going to have to fight a ton of different matches to get your master level up. And I don't understand why they made that so difficult. The only thing I can think of in my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is a perfect microtransaction situation, and I feel like it's coming. I can sense it. It's right around the corner. They're going to introduce it in another couple weeks, and we're all going to be pissed because they're going to introduce a microtransaction that allows you to skip to the max level of your masters, or even just max level of your main character. And I think this is probably one of the things that really annoyed me about the main game, about the World Tour Mode, is because I would spend so much time leveling myself up, and then I would want to learn from a different master, and I would spend so much time leveling the master up so I can get specific movesets I wanted from that master, and it would take so much time for me to do that so I can get through the main game with the fight style that I want to get through the main game with. And because I spent so much time on that, I got really annoyed and really frustrated dealing with the main story. And that's probably what made me hate the World Tour mode the most. Like, honestly, I think most of the elements on this list I can get past. I can get past the cheesy and kind of bad story that has an awful ending, by the way, which I didn't even mention. I can get past the fact that the protagonist is a silent protagonist and doesn't even allow you to choose dialogue options. Can get past the fact that the main roster was sidelined, but the thing I can't get past is the fact that I have to spend so many damn hours into the gameplay, into fighting these random ass encounters to level myself up, and I still am not even close to where I want to be at. That is frustrating, and I guarantee you, I am calling it right now, right this second, we are going to see a microtransaction that makes that easier, and that is gonna piss me off so much because I gave the game a really good score. Again, if you haven't seen my review already, please go check that out. But I gave the game a really good score, and I'm gonna regret it when I see them come in with that microtransaction, and I'm gonna think, told you, I knew that was gonna happen. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space. Guys, let me know what you think. Do you think the World Tour mode is actually a really good mode? Do you actually enjoy it? Or are you like me? Do you hate it? And what things do you hate most about the World Tour mode? What can Capcom do in the future to improve upon your single player experience? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the like or dislike button if you really enjoyed this video or hated this video. But as always, guys, I'll see you on the next Nerd Space. Take care.